drastic norms change as a result of the Industrial Revolution? Well, why don't we travel back in time so you can see just for yourself how the revolution changed?
Yes!
Who do you work for?
Myself, of course.
How do you balance work and family?
Work and family are combined. We, the family, work together to achieve the necessary daily tasks.
And exactly what daily tasks do you and your family perform?
We produce products for ourselves, such as food and clothing.
One of the major transitions that took place during the Industrial Revolution was from domestic industry to factory work and coal mining. Families had worked in conjunction to produce the goods necessary for their survival, typically with the father or patriarch as the overseer. Work and family were much more intertwined before the introduction of industrialism. Post-revolution society saw the separation of work and family. How did you meet your wife?
Our parents knew each other when we were little and had always planned for us to marry each other.
How many children do you have?
I've had 5 children, but 3 of them died as an infant. 2 are with me now.
Before the Industrial Revolution, kids were seen as an asset to help with necessary daily tasks. For one thing, school attendance was not compulsory, making children much more available. Women tended to have more children as infant mortality rates were much higher.
Do you work? How do you and your family obtain food?
My family and I work together to carry out daily tasks, and every Saturday morning, my daughter and we walk 40 minutes to the market to get bread and the fruits and vegetables grown nearby that we buy from others at the market.
Do you attend school?
I go to Sunday school on our day of rest, but our family hasn't enough money as is.
So what do you spend your days doing?
I work around our family farm, planting and harvesting crops, raising the cattle, and helping around the house.
Child labor changed after industrialization. Before, kids did work, but they worked with their families to survive. After, kids went to work in factories, mills, and coal mines to bring in extra income. This changed the dynamic of many family households. For one, it was yet another example of the separation of work and family. Mother-child relationships were more personal and less communal after the revolution, but mothers had to send their kids off into the industrial world at a very young age.
Do you attend school?
No, unfortunately only my brother is allowed to.
And who do you consider to have raised you?
My parents, along with my brothers and sisters and all the folks in town.
So now that we've interviewed all these people living before Industrial Revolution, do you kind of get a feel for what life was like? Yeah. Now, what was life like after the revolution? Well, why don't we travel back in time again and interview them?
What do you do for work?
Well, I work in a factory mass-producing necessities.
And how often do you see your family?
Well, I see my family in the morning before I leave for work, and sometimes I see them at night, and I see them on Sundays when I don't work.
So you never see your family at work?
No, the 2 lives are pretty separate.
And what about your wife? How did you meet her?
Well, we met at the bread shop across from the factory, and the rest is, as they say, history.
The model of marriage changed after the Industrial Revolution. Before, men and women married out of necessity with an emphasis on survival. If food was on the table and the family was provided for, the marriage was considered to be a success. Survival took on a less dominant role after the revolution because families were less dependent on each other for the production of necessities. They could rely on factories for mass production. People began to marry for companionship and emotional fulfillment, which led to modern concepts such as dating or courting.
How many kids do you have?
I have 1 child. I actually gave birth to him in a coal mine.
How lovely.
During the Revolution, reproduction did spike as child labor became prevalent, for children could provide families with extra income. Infant mortality rates remained sky high as unsanitary conditions persisted, and many infants were sent to wet nurses by mothers, some of whom worked alongside their husbands for 14 to 16 hours a day. But when the 1860s rolled around, wages increased while fertility decreased. The current average number of children born to one mother is 1.87 in America. In Great Britain, before the 1860s, the average was 5 to 6. Post-industrialization, children became less of an asset and more of a financial burden.
Do you work outside the house?
I did before my husband came along and I had children. Now my main job is to take care of the kids in the house.
some mothers continued to work brutal hours in the factories or mills after having kids, many stayed at home to raise the children and keep the house. Because of the transition from domestic industry to work away from home, the economic role of women began to decline, for the men typically acted as the breadwinner.
Do you attend school?
Oh, do I ever! My older siblings didn't. My sister worked in the factory until she got married, but they're all much older than me. Throughout the Revolution, child labor was rampant, and education was put on the back burner. Schools were private and required tuition. Public schools developed later, and this was when child labor declined. Do you attend school?
I go to a private school where I learn skills such as sewing and music.
After the Revolution, upper-class girls were educated by governesses while middle-class girls went to private schools.
Who do you consider to have raised you?
Definitely my mom. My dad works around the clock, so I spend most of my time with my mom.
The mother-child relationship changed along with everything else in society during the Industrial Revolution. A mother's main focus was no longer solely survival. Childbearing became less of a necessity and more of an emotional experience. Prior to the Revolution, the task of raising children had been regulated to the community a family lived in. Parents enlisted neighbors, older siblings, and others as caretakers for infants. After the Revolution, however, there was a switch, which also helps explain the decrease in children per mother. Domestic life became more privatized and separate. It was separate from work, the community, and the manufacturing of necessary products. Those things were now found outside of the home.
Wow, the Industrial Revolution really changed things, huh?
It sure did.
I finally see where the phrase "it takes a village to raise a child" comes from. Before the Industrial Revolution, mothers enlisted their entire community to help raise kids. I can't say the same for my mom.
I realized that the transition from family industry to factory work could have made such a difference in the terms of domestic roles in the family.
Me neither. Can you imagine working in a coal mine?
Not at all.
I mean, I do my chores, sometimes, but it's nothing compared to what children had to do to survive. I enjoy the separation of work and family. I never thought about how others grow our vegetables for us. It didn't used to be that way.
Exactly, and that the woman took care of the households, but yet the man was still the patriarch. The Industrial Revolution has really changed our everyday life. Without the Industrial Revolution, we'd be walking in this 20-degree weather instead of taking the car.
And without the Industrial Revolution, we wouldn't have been able to call for the ride in the first place.
Definitely.